Real quick before we begin, in this episode we do discuss sexual assault. If you are a survivor looking for hope, please call the National Sexual Assault Hotline. It's free and totally confidential and available to use 24/7. The number is 1-800-656-HOPE. That's 1-800-656-4673. On with the show.
Welcome, horror hounds, for another episode of Cadaver Dogs podcast. Please cross your legs and hide beneath the covers for this one before you get clipped. I'm Rob Pasercha.
I'm Devin Shepard.
And I'm David B. Jacobs.
And we are Cadaver Dogs. What's up, dudes?
Hey! Feeling very unsexy this week, I think.
Oh, yeah?
I was man. I don't know about you guys, conflicting thoughts all week, man.
I mean, I know, this first movie, Devin really wanted us all to watch together.
I'm so
and
mad!
Then Rob just went ahead and watched it on his own, just without saying anything. But then, Devin, you bailed on me, because I was going to come and watch it still. And then you were just like, nah, I'm too tired. So I went to our friend Amanda's instead. And watched it with Amanda.
And then none of us watched it together, and I had to watch it alone. So sad.
I would have been disappointing. I was actually pretty much unfazed. Probably because the movies we watched the week before, but, to each their own, I guess.
Yeah, fair. We did just do some also pretty awful fucking penile sex movies.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, just my reaction, just to sum it up for you, was the first big scene where something happens. The guy is screaming, he jumps into the water, and I'm just sitting there, Amanda's just sitting there, and then I just go... and I just start laughing hysterically.
Oh, that's what I wanted. That's what I wanted.
Oh, wow. Okay. So, speaking of genital mutilation, to cut right to the beef, our first film is going to be explained by none other than Devin Shepard.
The resident female cadaver dog. What up? All right, so our first movie takes us to a picturesque suburban neighborhood. Ignoring those nuclear towers, Dawn is an idyllic teenage girl. She's beautiful, kind, loving to her family, again, ignoring her stepbrother who is unhealthy and in love with her. And she is also saving herself for marriage. She really wants you to know that she is saving herself for marriage. But that promise ring around her finger begins to bear weight when she meets the new kid in town, Toby. Their romance blossoms, but Dawn struggles with the unpure thoughts that begin to enter her mind. There must be something wrong with her. One date, Toby takes advantage of Dawn. He really needs this. He hasn't jacked off since Easter. But as he enters Dawn, something snaps. His penis is severed and falls to the floor. Or like Rob says, it's clipped. What the fuck? Now there really must be something wrong with Dawn. She goes on an educational journey to find out what is going on with her vagina, and could it actually be the legendary Vagina Dentata? This is Teeth, written and directed by Mitchell Lichtenstein.
So Devin's already said it, but Rob, real fast, I want you to repeat after me. Vagina.
Vagina?
Great.
Thank you. Yes, I explicitly put those in there. We are going to say a lot of penis and vagina in this episode. Get with it.
I thought it was vagine until I was 13.
That says so much about actually something that this movie talks about too.
Yeah.
So to start us off, do you guys think this movie is pro or anti-sex? Because, there's a lot of talk in there about abstinence, and I think it is critical of abstinence, but at the same time, it's also about rape culture and whatnot. So what do you guys think?
Well, I think it's pretty on the nose about just the woman's role in sex and how they should be trying to take some sort of active participation in the conversation around it, because it seems like the entire rape culture and all the religious symbolism and whatnot is about their submissive role and how they're just a party to this conversation, but not like an active participant.
Yeah, I would add to that. I agree. I don't think it's necessarily about pro or anti-sex. It's about what Rob just said, but not so much about like women haven't been passive in it. It's more of the suppression of women's sexuality.
Heavily, yeah. I mean, our main character is practicing abstinence, at least in the beginning of the movie, and it is really, really critical of abstinence and of religion. Even though Christianity is never like directly referenced in the movie, it is strongly, strongly implied.
No, Christianity's directly referenced. They're
not directly.
They're part of like, yeah, the promise ring and everything. They're like definitely Christians, and they start talking about the
exactly. It's
creation
heavily
story
implied.
and everything. No, it's direct. They're
No.
they're in a Christian youth group. It's
No.
not direct.
I think
talking
David's
about-
right. You never see a cross anywhere. You never hear the word church.
Yeah, but they start
There's a
quoting
cross
the
in
Bible.
a movie that they're watching.
I mean, they quote scripture.
They do quote
When do they-
scripture, but they quote Genesis, which
They do quote Genesis. So they could be Mormons. We don't actually know if they're not Mormons or Catholics. But it's all from that branch of like Christianity, or like the books, for sure.
Well, it's something that really stuck with me. So this is, I'll just go ahead and say that like this was one of my favorite movies in high school. Like I obsessively watched this movie. I think the first time I saw it, must have been like 15, 16 when it came out. So I was around the age that Dawn is in the film. And like, this was a really informative movie for me as I'm going through my own just puberty and sexual awakening. But I mean, Rob said this earlier. He thought the word was vagine for a really long time. And it's because I think we do a really bad job educating on sex, especially female sex in America, at least. And I don't know about you guys, but like my sexual education was so minimal growing up. And I just loved that I was able to watch a film that reflected that and reflected my own journey. And I thought that was so cool. And it was like the first time I was like, someone gets what I'm going through.
For the record, I was kidding about the vagine thing. I actually had a pretty extensive sexual education. No, because I went to kind of a weird church called the Unitarian Universalist Church, which is a whole other thing. But they like showed us videos and stuff when we were very young. So we had like a pretty good understanding of sexual intercourse and the female and male anatomy, sexual organs when I was like
you
6,
learn that
7
in
years old.
church?
Yeah, it's a weird church. I mean, they're not really religious. They're about just doing good on the planet and accepting everybody and blah, 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 that kind of thing. Anyway, yeah, so I think I had more of a sexual education than anyone else. Whereas like when I was in high school, I remember my gym teacher drawing himself on the board stick figure fashion. He goes, "This is me," and then he drew a line for his penis across the board as a joke.
Wow.
And then they showed us like pictures of STDs. That was basically my sex education.
Yeah, lots of pictures of STDs.
Yes,
that I definitely remember.
But I never saw images of the vagina growing up.
I don't remember if I did or not.
You never saw the blue waffle?
No.
It's gross. For any of our listeners, you can go look it up if you want to be scarred for life.
Okay. I don't know what that is. Yeah, they showed us a lot of STD pictures, and it was all about STDs, and that was pretty much the main thing that they talked about.
Right.
My school was not abstinence only, but it was abstinence is the only thing that actually works, was my school.
It definitely wasn't abstinence only, but I mean, I think that's what I'm talking about. It's like you see all these things that to like push you away from sex, but you don't. I didn't learn anything about like what should and shouldn't be right down there. And I think that's what this movie says so much is like she literally like she's known that there are teeth down there, but she doesn't know that that's wrong.
Does she know there's teeth down there?
I'm pretty sure she does because and the whole thing is she's like, oh wait, like I shouldn't have teeth down there, or she like didn't know that like it was gonna cut off guy's dick.
Yeah,
she definitely didn't know that.
It's this weird realization that she doesn't know what's going on with her own body, and it's pretty interesting just talking to young women, especially internationally. A lot of them don't look at themselves down there. A lot of them are like very insecure about it. They don't want you to look at it. They don't want to look at it themselves. They've never actually gotten a mirror out.
Yeah,
I think this movie's making commentary on that.
And I love the scene where she starts to like masturbate, because I think that's something that a lot of women struggle through,
man.
is like men, that's always just a thing that guys, like boys will be boys kind of attitude about it. Like we just are like, yeah, that's a thing guys do. But like women, we never, at least when I was growing up, like we don't talk about masturbation. And like if you do that, there is that, you know, she starts to go down there, and then she immediately stops herself and says, what's wrong with me? And I think that moment is so relative of being a woman growing up, especially during this time where suppression against female sexuality was strong.
Yeah, and it's really interesting, the dichotomy between her and her half-brother, or her stepbrother. That first scene of the movie is actually one of the better scenes, I think, when him and her are little kids and they're playing in the kiddie pool. Yeah. And it's kind of weird. It's almost like a little bit innocent. Like, you know, he's young enough to where he doesn't really know exactly what he's doing, and neither does she. And they're like, I'll show you yours, you show me your mine. And then he touches. And that's when he learns really quickly, oh, that's going too far. That's something I'm not supposed to do.
I don't think it's innocent. I think that's molestation.
Yeah, no. Yeah,
I think
he's not just like, oh, what is that? He's like, he went in.
That's why it was going too far. And there was like a straight realization. That's like this movie plays those themes molestation.
Of like... Watching it with that in mind, I saw a very... It became a sad film, honestly. It's a girl who struggled with someone who molested her when she was very little, and now she has bad views about sex. Well, not bad views. She has hard views about sex. And, like, it's someone close to her. Like, it became this, like, sad survivor story almost. Well, and it's not sad. I mean, the ending I don't think is sad. But, you know, it's a survivor story, is guess what I'm saying.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even before Toby tries to rape her, she actually has a big crush on this guy. It's like, she's like, we're so in sync. But at the same time, she's like, oh, but I want to masturbate, so we shouldn't see each other anymore. Mm-hmm. Which is like, that's so bizarre, and like that's a terrible logic. That they're so afraid, she's so afraid of her sexuality that she won't let herself meet someone who she could wind up with, who she wants to wind up with.
Yeah.
Speaking of, Toby's the most evil character in the movie, probably.
I don't
Except for maybe the
him.
gynecologist. Yeah, it's weird. It's like all the guys in this are just so exaggerated and extreme.
Yeah, I mean...
It's kind of like when we talked about the screwfly solution. They just kind of exaggerate all the tensions between the sexes.
I think with Toby, it's also that he also has this abstinence thing. And he's not lying when he says that he hasn't masturbated since 8th grade. He actually has not masturbated since 8th grade.
Easter.
And he hasn't... Easter? Was it Easter?
Yeah.
Okay. It's Easter.
Regardless, he hasn't been taught about consent, and I think that's also something that the movie goes through. And I'm not, also just to be clear, I am not taking the responsibility away from him. He's a fucking monster. But along with abstinence and not teaching people what a vagina is, they're also not teaching these kids how to engage with each other. Dawn doesn't have the language to, like, understand that she was raped. Like, she doesn't seem to be able to verbalize that. She blames herself. She feels enormous guilt for being assaulted.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I want to go back to this Toby moment, because you said something interesting and it made me think. I also don't want to, like, forgive Toby. Like, he is a rapist, and that there's no empathizing with that. But I'm also curious if he was also a victim of molestation, because when he's talking about, he's had sex before, he talks about it to her, and he says, I'm still pure in his eyes. And it was that one time, I'm still wrestling with the guilt from it. And then later on, when he is attacking her, he says, don't worry, you'll still be pure in his eyes. And so I'm wondering if that means, like, if she isn't willing to go through with it, does that make her still pure? And then in that sense, is that why he himself said that he was still pure, because he wasn't willing to go through with it that original time? And he did, like you said, David, she's wrestling with guilt from the attack. It seems like he's also wrestling with guilt from whatever happened. And so I'm curious if he is also a survivor.
Yeah, I don't know. I kind of drew that same parallel, but I mean, I don't really have any evidence to go on. But it's kind of go back to David's point about like victim blaming. We can kind of view that whole situation as like kind of metaphorical for just coming out to the police against your attacker, because it can be viewed as like ending their life, right? Because they get arrested and they have to go to jail and all that other kind of thing. In this one, he literally dies, so his life is literally ended. But she kind of feels guilty for having done that. And then you can kind of take that to like the more real world situation where you just get them in a lot of trouble and you metaphorically end their life by, you know, giving up to the authorities. And that's where this kind of idea of like victim blaming is like so toxic. It's because you kind of make people scared of doing harm to the person who's done them harm.
Yeah.
You guys know the story of Medusa?
Yeah. But our viewers might not know it.
Yeah. So they reference Medusa a few times throughout this movie. And what if you know anything about her, she has snakes for hair, and if you look at her, you turn to stone. Or sometimes if she looks at you, you turn to stone. But the fuller story, and there's a few different interpretations, it's changed a bit over time, but in many versions of the story, she was born mortal, a beautiful woman or whatever, and then Poseidon raped her in Athena's temple. She was, in some versions, she was actually an apostle of Athena, and so she was working in this temple, and Poseidon raped her. And Athena said, "That's not okay, you had sex in my temple," and punishes Medusa by turning her into this monster.
Mm-hmm.
Which is like, when I first found that out, why was I always taught that Medusa's a villain? Like, she literally never did anything. She doesn't even choose to turn people into stone. That happens when they look at her. When they look at her.
That's really fucking awful.
Yeah. So it ends by, I think it's Perseus.
Perseus,
right?
cuts off her head. He looks at her reflection in his shield.
Right, but he is also aided by Athena. So you can look at the story in two ways, as either like kind of a mercy killing or Athena just taking her revenge all the way to the end.
Yeah.
It's kind of viewed in both different ways.
And absolutely nothing against Poseidon. They don't do anything to penalize him at all.
Penalize.
Yeah. Yeah, Perseus, he uses the shield, he looks into the reflection, and he goes, "Medusa, Medusa, 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 Medusa." And then she appeared. But yeah, this movie keeps referencing Medusa, and I feel like that's so relevant that it ties into all the things that Dawn is Medusa. She is this person who is assaulted, but she feels that she is the monster and that people will look at her as the monster. The police are after her, although they don't know who it is. And she has this weird mutation that when men come after her, not through the male gaze, but through actual rape, they lose their penises, which is involuntary on her part.
Yeah.
Well, sort of. But at the end, it kind of seems like she learns how to do it.
And
she does learn to.
Yeah, and I don't think learn to. I think she becomes empowered. She doesn't see herself as a monster anymore. She sees herself as a powerful being with a gift, so to speak.
Mm. And that really happens.
Ryan?
Yeah. When she meets with Ryan, who... That's such an odd scene. So she
it's weird.
runs to Ryan for some reason. Why'd she go to Ryan, of all people? Like, she has other friends. It's like established in the movie. She has
I think
other
her friends kind of
abandoned
abandoned her because she broke her abstinence. I mean, she didn't. She was raped. But there's this strange scene that I actually thought was a dream sequence at first, when she confesses to the abstinence group. And
does she confess?
Sort of.
I don't know.
It's a weird scene.
I don't think she outright says it. Yeah, and that's the last time we see her friends, and they're just like, oh, she's going bonkers.
Yeah, I mean, I think they just don't appear again after that. I mean, she is learning that this abstinence education is harmful for her, and that it has this cult-like feel to it. She can't turn to them.
Right. She can't tell them that she's had sex because they will turn against her. So who can she talk to about sex? The guy who kind of presented it and put it on the table, Ryan.
Yeah. And then he date rapes her, and she wakes up in the middle of the date rape and consents. It's a very, very weird. I'm confused.
She cannot consent because she is on drugs.
Yes.
So just to be clear.
Yes.
But then the next day, she willingly sleeps with him.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. But him, like an idiot, tells her that it was a competition. A bet.
What a fucking
And
asshole.
then she clips him, right?
Which is great.
Yeah, I mean, like, you know, you could talk about whether or not that's justified, like to clip somebody because they pissed you off, which is, you know, it's not, but it's a movie, you know. It's like,
Yeah, and that also ties into the lack of education about consent. It was never explained to her, like, oh, if a guy drugs you and then has sex with you, then that is rape, by the way. So when she wakes up the next morning, she's like, oh, yeah, I think I had a good time. That's right.
Yeah, again, so relative of the female experience in the early 2000s. And
it's also, it calls back to like the earlier myths that she looks up, that she has to find like a man to conquer her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like conquering doesn't really imply consent.
It's like, it's played as a joke when he tells her, like, oh, I'm gonna conquer you. That's what I'll do, and then it will work out. And she's drugged, so she's like, okay, great. But like that is actually what a lot of those myths are, is that the man who defeats the Vagina Dentata has to rape her in order to do so, which is so fucked up.
Except for the Japanese one where she gets a giant metal dildo.
In the Japanese one, she does it herself.
Wait, can you explain the Japanese one?
It's the same myth as all the others. There's a woman with teeth in her vagina. Except in this one, she's accidentally hurting men she doesn't want to hurt. I think she clips like 2 would-be grooms. So then she gets like a metal dildo and knocks the teeth out with it. It's a different story.
Yeah, and what I like about Teeth is that she takes it on and she's like, I don't need a man to conquer this. Like, I can... Basically, at the end, she's like, I can live with this. And I don't have to be seen as a monster, and I don't have to destroy what is part of me. I can just go on being who I am.
But do you like how she clips her stepbrother at the end?
Yeah, it's hilarious.
I felt bad for her dad. Like, she dips, his wife dies, she runs off, and then she kills his son. So he's left with nobody, and he seemed like a nice guy. She just kind of like fucked him over hardcore.
But he wanted to kick the son out anyway. And I think he's just
Brad's
like too afraid to like stand up. Yeah, I mean, we also don't know if Brad dies, but the dad's too afraid to stand up to his son, or just like can't. You know, she's the only one that can.
It's implied that his wife stops him. Right in the first scene of the movie, his wife is like, "Don't."
No, but in the scene where he actually does stand up to him, his son pushes back.
Dog almost. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I get that, but it was also in a heat of passion, and like the kid's like 17, 18. That doesn't mean like kill the guy.
I mean, he molested her.
But it's just, I feel bad for the father. Like, I just feel like he just gets screwed over at the end. I was like, what about that guy? Like, he's the only nice guy in the movie. All the other guys are evil.
Yeah, that's true. The father is like legitimately seems to be a good person. He does not do anything wrong. He's I mean, except that maybe he's a bit enabling of his son is the worst thing you could say about him.
Yeah, but the movie implies that that's more the mother
who
does that. It goes out of its way to imply that she stops him from disciplining him.
Yeah, she says to the husband, just cut him some slack, which was the ultimate, like, let boys be boys situation.
Don't worry, we will cut him some slack.
Ayo.
So this is getting into an interesting idea, because I am wondering if you guys think that the ending of this movie is happy or not, and it seems like you guys have two completely different interpretations of that. But for me, I know, Devin, you're talking about how it's really empowering for her, but I don't think it's a happy ending for Dawn at all.
Oh. See, I kind of do. I feel like she just becomes like a superhero. It's kind of a superhero origin story, right? There's like a toxic waste thing in the background.
Yeah.
They have some kind of weird... mutation. They kind of become like an orphan, and people hurt them, traumatize them, but then they take over and they use their powers for the greater good, which in this case is
The greater good.
Clipping.
Every few thousand years, evolution leaps forward.
Yeah. And
Patrick Stewart, X-Men.
She just takes on, would-be creepy hitchhike picker-uppers.
Yeah, but like, she loses her family, she loses her friends, her repression gets the better of her, she will never be able to have like an actual healthy sexual relationship.
We don't know that.
No, she
Yeah,
could.
we don't know that, but it's going to be difficult for her. She's
It's going to be
lost
difficult
her
for
ability
every woman.
to trust people.
We don't know
she
that.
is homeless. She's homeless. She's hitchhiking from person to person, and her only way of defending herself against these people is to let them rape her.
Well, if you let... Well, that's
No.
kind of weird to say.
Yeah,
it that way.
that's
if you
not-
let someone
yeah.
rape you, they're not really getting raped. You're like letting them... Well, that's not true exactly either.
She
But
didn't want... Like this old man in the end, the creepy hitchhiker, the creepy guy who she hitchhikes with, she would be completely happy if he would just let her out of the car, and she doesn't need to clip his dick.
We don't
But
know
she's
that
not
she.
given a
We don't
choice.
know that she clips her dick. Yeah, it's implied, but all that we like see at the end is Dawn not being afraid of facing whatever is coming to her. And yeah, you can imply that that means that she's going to cut off his dick, but it doesn't matter what does happen because we can. All we know is that she's probably going to get away from the situation and not be afraid anymore, and not be. I don't want to say weak, but yeah, not be weaker that she's been showing this entire time. She's going to stand up for herself and fight back now.
Yeah, and it's kind of like that trope of like riding off into the sunset, like the hero leaves at the end, with nothing on their back, but they know that they're powerful and they can take on any kind of situation. Like in the old westerns, they ride off. That's like the feeling I got.
Yeah, and I get what you're saying, David, and
Yeah.
I can see that as a view, but like at the same time, I'm like, those are materialistic things, and all I care about is like, is this person like what's better? Like you're questioning like, what's a better life? Is it living in this repressed town, like in this repressed body of like living a falsehood where you like hate yourself? Like she spent her entire teenagedom being like, what is wrong with me? And like you said earlier, she was never going to be able to have a relationship with somebody because she was too scared to have sex with them. But now that's kind of that fear is taken away from her.
Mm-hmm.
It's an interesting question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the happy ending for me isn't staying in the repressed town. It's if people would stop treating her like shit and assaulting her and judging her.
Yeah.
And
but is that realistic?
That would be... No, and that's the problem.
Yeah, in the reality of the movie, it's like I said, it's exaggerated. So it's just men are going to assault you wherever you go. That's the world this movie creates, right? Which, is eerily similar to reality, but hopefully it's not quite as extreme all the time. And that's like how she has to take care of it. It's like, wow, now she has teeth to bite back. Even the gynecologist is creepy. There's like, when that scene happened, I'm like, okay, it's one of those movies where all the guys are evil. Gotcha.
Before we get into the second movie, let's hear a word from our sponsor.
The devil is in the details. Trim your nails before reading this one. The terrifying visuals might have you clawing at your eyes. The author of Ped, Flanagan, and Buds, James Longmore, just re-released one of his finest horror novels, Tenebrion. Amateur filmmakers break into an abandoned school to perform and film an authentic black mass, inadvertently invoking a demon. The malevolent demon of darkness requires particular circumstances and sacrifices to rend a fissure between the worlds and set free its brethren. It has manipulated humans for centuries to put things into place, and the movie makers are the unfortunate final pieces of its nefarious puzzle. The filmmakers will attempt to return Tenebrion to the pit of Hades, as it hunts them all down one by one for inclusion in its hellish gateway. You can find the novel on Amazon or check for a link in the description of this episode. Now, back to the show.
Welcome back after a quick commercial break for our second film. Something might be following you around in this film, so please, if you're looking over your shoulder, you see something that you don't think is there, ask someone next to you, or maybe go see a psychologist.
After a night of passion, Jay is greeted by a surprise. Her date Hugh chloroforms her and ties her to a chair, forcing her to watch as a strange, naked woman slowly creeps towards him. He explains that this is a monster which has been following him for some time now, ever since he had a one-night stand with someone he met at a bar. Now he's passed the monster on to Jay, a shapeshifter invisible to everyone but her. It's slow, but it's not dumb, and her life is transformed as she is forced to run from it or pass it on to someone else. But wherever she is, there's one thing for certain: it follows. Directed by David Robert Mitchell, starring Micah Monroe.
So I'm just going to get right into this and ask the big question, because this is like really what I want to talk about. What do you think this film is about? What does it represent?
All right, I'm going to take a really lame middle ground approach and say that it's not specifically trauma or necessarily specifically STDs, but it's the cost of sexual relations and how there's no such thing as cheap sex without strings attached.
Awesome. Rob and I basically might have the same idea. I have more to it, but that's like, yeah, I agree. That's like the basis for me as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much mine as well, so...
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that the creature, like, yes, it can work as a metaphor for STDs or aging or whatever, and I think that all of these different interpretations are there, and there's evidence to back them all up. For me, it's most interesting and works best as a metaphor for the trauma in the wake of a sexual assault, and I think that that is the most consistent throughout the movie, but all of these interpretations are going to be valid.
Yeah.
Yeah, my only problem with that is when, like, you pass it on to someone else, right? Like,
Yeah, no,
why does your trauma necessarily pass on to someone else just from sleeping with them if you were traumatized? Because within, like, any given room, like maybe myself, it's, like, possible that I would have slept with someone who's traumatized, but that doesn't transfer the trauma onto me. I don't get infected with their trauma unless I have a relationship with said person, whereas, like, an STD or an actual disease would. That's why I think the metaphor is about both things.
Well, trauma, yeah, it's definitely about both things, but trauma does affect the people around you as well. And if you're in a relationship with someone, then they are also going to be navigating your trauma alongside you, and that is part of what this movie is discussing. It's also discussing Jay's ability to return to having a sex life after this assault. That you can see in these other scenes that she's a bit uncomfortable in them when she's having sex with, what's the neighbor's name again? Greg. When she's having sex with Greg, you can see he's like, ooh, yeah, I'm getting laid. And she's like, not into it. But she has to do it to literally survive. Which is also a way that people respond to trauma. Sometimes they're going to try to reclaim control of their lives by having more sex.
Yeah. And before we get too far down that road, I do want to hear why you think there is sexual trauma.
You mean like literally what the assault is?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, she consents to have sex with this man. At least consents as much as you can when you don't know that it's literally a death sentence. This is also where it fails a little bit as a metaphor for STDs because most STDs will not transfer 100% of the time. So, like, if you have HIV or AIDS or whatever, and you have sex with someone without telling them, it's a bit of a gray area, but it is not a one-to-one with this monster because it'll still only transfer like 9% of the time or something like that. Whereas the monster will always transfer 100% of the time.
Right.
One time having sex, it's transferred. Like, that is a death sentence, and it is a lot more complicated. And the fact that he doesn't tell her is fucking horrifying. And then he attacks her. He literally gags her, chloroforms her, ties her to a chair, and renders her completely helpless. And then afterward, he just dumps her on the side of the road and drives away.
Yeah.
That's definitely a rape metaphor, that whole, like, gagging scene when he's behind her. It even looks like in the position that there's no way around
even
that.
Not as a metaphor, it's an assault. Devin, what are you trying to say?
Yeah, I'm saying that is an assault, but I think it's hard to claim that is a sexual assault because, just like you said, there are two different things that happen. They have sex, and then he assaults her after sex. And I don't. Yeah. I think it's you don't necessarily have to combine those things to make I don't think it's a sexual assault. I think it's something different. Why show a scene of them having sex and it being a good experience if you're going to have a whole movie about a sexual assault, why not show a sexual assault scene? And like later on, and I know this is arguable, but when the cops do come to her house, they ask her if it was consensual, and she says yes. And like, yeah, I can see the argument saying that like she's scared to say no, but like, why have that moment in there?
Oh no, I think the opposite. That the cops aren't listening to her. She's telling them, no, the sex was consensual, but he still attacked me. And they're like, without necessarily intending the condescension, they are implicitly blaming her for agreeing to have sex with him.
But but you also just said, like, yes, the sex was consensual, but then he attacked me. Again, separating the sex from the attack and not saying it was a sexual assault.
Yeah, but I'm saying that the way they shot him on top of her from behind with his mouth covering her face and then like thrusting around was a metaphor for sexual assault. Well, in the reality of the movie, she was not sexually assaulted.
A metaphor, and in her brain, like, what does she think's going to happen? She thinks he's going to rape her.
Does she?
I think she thinks he's going to hurt her when she's tied up.
Yeah.
Definitely.
That's what I would think if I were her.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be terrified. But like, why show the consensual sex scene? And like, for me, and this is what Rob was saying a little bit earlier, like this movie is about how sex changes relationships and like how as you grow older, sex just like kind of just changes everything. There's so many times throughout the film that they're just talking about how when they were kids, everything was so much different. When they're talking about looking through the porno magazines as kids, they're like, we had no idea what sex was then. We were so stupid. And it just really shows that, to me, how just like what it feels like to grow up in a very sad way.
I mean, I think this movie is really anti-sex. Yeah, I don't think it has a positive view of sex at all in any way, at any point in the movie. I think that it always portrays sex as being, like, a little bit traumatic, or a lot bit traumatic.
Yeah, I agree.
And, I mean, she does get a rape kit, which I never noticed before until this watch, that she literally gets a rape kit.
Yeah.
Yeah, the police don't really help her at all.
The police are totally useless in this movie because they go to the house where they know the guy was staying, and they instantly find clues very easily on how to find him. Just some high school kids. Or like, what are they?
Yeah.
Freshmen and college kids? I guess they're college kids.
No, high school.
She's college.
Are they high school?
She's college.
She is?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought they were like late teens, early 20s, right?
Yeah, because she says she had sex with Greg in high school when she was in high school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I like how, or I found it really interesting how she's talking about her like ideal guy and like ideal boyfriend right before she gets chloroformed. And it's like there is this idea of like the fantasies of youth versus the realities of adulthood.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So like the metaphor of age, which I mean, Devin, this is something I didn't really put together, but now you're kind of convincing me, is not lost in that. It's a constant struggle between the fantasies of where we think sexual relationships germinated and how they're going to be and what it's going to be like and what it is actually like. Whereas even at the very end of the movie, when she gets together with her friend and the idea is that it's following both of them, they have sex and they're like, well, how do you feel now? He's like, I don't feel any different. And it's this weird like melancholy thing where he finally has gotten what he's wanted this whole time. He's been fawning after her for years, since they're little kids. Now she finally like gives in to him, you know, all right, I guess you're the guy who's going to protect me. And it just feels like vapid.
Yeah, it feels totally vapid because you're just like, yeah, I love how you said it. It's this disillusionment of what adulthood is going to be. Another thing too is the original carrier, Hugh, who gives it to Jay, Micah Monroe, when they're on the date, they're playing that game and she's like, who do you want to be? And he picks out the child. And he himself is like, wouldn't that be great just to have your whole life ahead of you? And it like immediately shows this fear of being an adult.
Mm-hmm. And that game also ties into the fact that before everything happens, looking at people watching as a game for her, that she's like, oh, isn't this weird that we're like actually paying attention to strangers? Then, of course, a week later, she'll spend her entire time looking at strangers and trying to figure out if any of them are being strange or walking toward her.
Yeah, so terrifying.
Yeah. There's this idea that when you're an adult, there's just so much more cost to your actions, so many more consequences. Where when you're a kid, you're carefree because literally, for the most part, you have guardians, like your parents or whoever, making sure that if you do something stupid, they're just like, it's fine. I'll pick you up. I'll pull you out of the road. Oh, you fell down. No big deal. Oh, you broke this. I'll fix it. But when you're an adult, even the people you don't realize can dramatically affect your life because you're seeing the world for like the first time as it is. And I think it's interesting that the monster is invisible to everyone else because everyone else is not seeing the real world. Only the people who are infected see the real world, like the underbelly of the thing.
Yeah. And you never know who's going to affect you. That's why the monster looks like something different. And I love the keeping it could look like somebody you know.
Right. Okay.
I have a theory about that, actually.
Always takes on the view of someone in like the sex field or medical field, right? It either looks like a prostitute or a drug addict, or I think it might even look like an AIDS patient at one point, or like a naked person.
Oh.
What do you guys think about that?
So it's interesting that the monster is specifically shown to be intelligent. Hugh mentions that it's intelligent, and at the end of the movie, like their plan to catch in the pool fails partially because the monster just doesn't fall for the trap. It's like, what do you think? I'm stupid?
Yeah.
But then it's like, if the monster is in control of its forms, then it would just turn into her dad from the beginning and walk right up to her, and she would think nothing of it. So I don't think the monster is in control of its forms. I think that it is based on her and her fears, and it is a personification of basically her nightmares and flashbacks, again going into the sexual assault thing. The first time we see the monster, it is a naked, vulnerable woman because she feels vulnerable. The second time, it is an old woman going into the idea of aging because she's now thinking about her own mortality. She's sort of reconsidered the way she's looking at the world. Nothing feels pure anymore. Then it turns into another semi-naked woman who's beaten up and battered. Then it starts turning into terrifying men. Like, it transforms into this next step. And it only really turns into anyone she knows when she realizes what's going on. When she accepts that it's real, that's the only time it starts turning into people that she knows. Which is partially, basically, I think that if Hugh had never said that, then it wouldn't have happened. Because she wouldn't have been expecting it. But I think it's also about her losing trust in her friends. When it turns into Yara, she then gets into a car and drives away from all of them and just isolates herself from her friends. Later on, it turns into her dad twice, actually. When it's an old man on the roof, that's actually her father.
Oh, really?
Oh, interesting.
And then in the pool, it's her younger father.
Oh.
That's so bizarre.
How do you know that?
We see... There are pictures.
Oh. Who's the tall guy?
I don't think that's anyone she knows. I think that's just a scary person.
Okay, yeah, because he's creepy.
They're like, let's find someone who's 8 feet tall. It'll be scary.
But
it is like her being afraid of intimidating men.
Right, and it's the neighbors.
Yep, then it's the neighbor kid.
Yeah.
What about when Greg gets killed and it turns into his mother? That was weird.
Yeah, his naked mother.
And it also kind of like fucks him to death.
Yeah, that was...
I think that's the only time we actually see it kill someone.
Yeah.
That's how it kills, is by having sex.
Or like rubbing itself
or
on
humping.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, or humping.
Yeah, it turns you into like kind of like breaks your legs or some shit.
It's very shunting-esque. There was like...
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing I noticed this time with Greg that I'd never caught on to before, the reason he doesn't see the monster for several days is that directly after having sex with Jay, he had sex with another girl.
Implied, yeah, because he has sex with Jay, and then like the next shot is him surrounded by girls at a table. There's like 4 of them and just Greg.
Yeah. Oh, that makes more sense. I thought
That's
he was
why
just
he doesn't
flirting.
see the monster.
That's pretty good. I didn't catch that.
So
yeah, and he's just stuffing burgers in his face. That's how Greg gets girls. Just shoves burgers in his face.
He's literally just not like Jay has explicitly explained to him what to expect, and he just like goes and has sex with someone else anyway.
Yeah,
like he
totally
just
ignores
wound up killing someone else.
Yeah, he just didn't believe her, and
yeah,
and that's probably what happened with the monster for most people.
Yeah,
as awful as Hugh is, at least he took some sort of responsibility for it.
Yeah.
Is there anything new you guys want to say? Or you want to kind of wrap it up?
I mean, yeah, but I don't want to just like keep hammering my point that it's not sexual assault. I don't really want to do that, but I have other like thoughts about that.
Oh yeah, go into it. I mean,
Yeah, why do you think... Because you're not just saying that you don't think the sexual assault metaphor is as strong as the other one. You're saying that you literally don't think it's about sexual assault at all. You outright don't agree with my interpretation.
Yeah. I'm still on this idea that it's not sexual assault. I mean, like, for me, it kind of just feels like surviving trauma of a bad relationship almost. Like, Hugh Jeff obviously is not a great guy because he lies about his name, he lies about where he lives, he like says all these things that, like, if you find that out about whoever you were dating during the time, like, that's traumatic, and then it affects every relationship that you have going forward. And to me, I just like, I'm still separating the assault from the sex and just see the assault as like a metaphor for like a bad relationship and one that's just shitty with shitty people because people are shitty.
yeah. I kind of agree with you. I think it definitely has a lot to say about that, about like how disillusioned we get with relationships as an adult. So Hugh, they find out where he is because they're looking at a picture of him with his high school jacket on, right? And he's next to his presumably girlfriend, who he later says died, right?
Yeah.
So what that gets to me is that his girlfriend cheated on him, got the thing, and then gave it to him.
He said he got it at a bar.
Oh, yeah.
He did say,
oh, you're right.
Oh, maybe he got it at a bar and then he killed her, right?
Yeah,
Unless he's lying.
He gave
I
it to
guess.
her.
Ah.
Oh, so he cheated.
And then he killed his girlfriend accidentally.
Where we were going with this? Where we were going?
Shitty relationships.
Rob,
changing
why did
your
you bring
view.
up the high school picture?
Because it seems like he's become disillusioned with relationships also, and that's like colored his life. Like, I had this idea of who I would become and who I'd be with, and it would be all like rosy, but now as I enter the reality of the real world, it's a lot more complicated, and it's a lot darker than I thought it was going to be.
Do you think it's weird that he kept a picture of him and his girlfriend in high school in a porno mag that he was obviously jacking off to?
I also think it was weird that he was looking at porno mags in like 2015.
That's a thing throughout the movie though, is that it intentionally blurs time period a lot. Like they're watching old televisions, they also have a cell phone, they also have a seashell weird Kindle thing that makes no sense. It mixes a lot of time periods together. That's completely intentional on the director's part because he wanted to make it more dreamlike.
Oh, that's interesting, because it's hard to nail down when it is, because it seems antiquated, and then I look in like 2015, it seems more like 90s almost.
The movie theater is so fucking weird too. It's like a fucking Broadway auditorium or something. It's such a bizarre theater.
Actually, that fits a lot
also,
to
why is he going to the movies when there's a thing following him?
I don't know. That was stupid on his part. Maybe he slept with somebody and didn't think it was following him. But that all that what you guys are talking about kind of goes to my point too. It's like this town feels a little frozen in time. Like nothing is moving, and we're not aging. And then all of a sudden, she's aging rapidly, and the thing that follows her is constantly coming after her. There's this quote. I have to read this quote. It's at the end of the movie. It's the last thing that the girl reads on her seashell, and I think this fits my theory about death or aging being what it represents, but I think it kind of like also fits what you're talking about too, David. Is it cool if I read it?
Yeah.
When there is torture, there's pain, and wounds physical agony, and all that distracts the mind from mental suffering, so that one is tormented by the wounds until the moment of death. And the most terrible agony may not be the wounds themselves, but in knowing for certain that within an hour, that within 10 minutes, then within half a minute, and now its very instant, your soul will leave your body, and you will no longer be a person, and that this is certain. The worst thing is that it is certain. We all die.
Yeah.
Yes, we all die.
Yeah, the only thing certain is death and taxes.
And that you'll be getting a Cadaver Dogs episode next Thursday.
So speaking of the ending, same question as Teeth. Do you guys think this ending is happy or at least semi-happy?
No.
No.
Not even a little bit.
Yeah, no.
Same. Great. We're all in agreement.
The whole movie has this like fucking distilled kind of like dragging atmosphere, like you're just kind of groggy and waking up and you don't want to leave.
Yeah.
There is an interesting thing when she finally has sex with Paul, that you look at that scene in contrast with when she has sex with Greg, and like she is actually into it this time. Like it does feel for a moment like, oh, she's able to enjoy sex again because it's someone that she cares about. Then the next shot after that is him presumably picking up prostitutes.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just the same cycle repeats. I fucking hate Paul.
I read that as he did pick up prostitutes.
Oh,
that
I also did.
Yeah.
He was thinking
That's what I
about it,
said.
but he didn't pick up prostitutes.
Oh.
Because he was kind of grossed out by them. Because right after that, it shows the thing following him.
I don't know if grossed out by them, but maybe because he didn't want to have sex with somebody else because, I mean, we can figure that he's in love with Jay.
Yeah. I think it's...
Or he thinks he's in love with Jay.
Right.
Yeah, they definitely went out of their way to pick not very attractive prostitutes. They look kind of like they're dirty and they've been out there for a while and they're in a very grimy background. Their clothes are kind of dirty. Their hair is scraggly. They're not the type of people you want to go sleep with without knowing first.
As a representation of sex, that's pretty good. A very strong visual representation of just like, hey, sex is gross. It is gross.
Yeah. Yeah. So I read that as him not doing it, him thinking about it, but I feel like he has a moral compass and he knows it's real, so he doesn't want to even, it's like part of that, but then I think it's more that he was just kind of repulsed.
Interesting.
Do you have sympathy for Paul?
Yeah, why not?
I don't.
Yeah, can you explain why you don't like Paul?
Yeah, why do you hate Paul?
I kind of see him, to compare him to Teeth for a moment, I kind of see him as a less exaggerated version of Ryan from Teeth. That he says he is in love with her and that he only wants what's good for her, but he's only after himself. He wants to sleep with the pretty girl. They mentioned that when they first kissed years ago, he immediately afterward kissed her sister. Like he's not actually interested in helping her. He just wants the sex. And he wants the status of having this pretty girlfriend who he's convinced himself he's been in love with for years, but I don't think he knows what that means, and I don't think that he's doing anything good for her. I think that he's so single-mindedly focused on, like, I can help you, I should be the one who you pass this thing on to, like, without even bothering to think about what that would mean. Like, he just wants that to happen for the sake of it. He's in love with the idea of Jay, not with her herself.
Do you have any more evidence to back that up? I'm just trying to see it.
I disagree with you.
It's just like,
yeah,
the mannerisms of him and the way that he's portrays himself, that we definitely see him as being very much interested in sex and not receiving it. Like when they go into Hugh's hideaway house, he immediately grabs the porno magazine and starts flipping through it, which is, it winds up working out for them, but that's a really weird way to go about that. In the climax of the movie, he is like trying to shoot the monster, but just winds up shooting all of them instead. He's very much like, I am the manly man who will protect you. It feels to me like he's taking advantage of her situation in order to get what he wants.
Yeah. See, the last part of what you're saying, I think, is probably true. He definitely takes advantage of the situation to get what he wants, but I don't think it's that he doesn't want good things for her or whatever. He just wants to have a relationship with her. So I don't think it's necessarily about sex.
Yeah.
And I also interpreted their first kiss as kind of like a kissing game kids would be playing, because they're presumably that young, so that after he kissed her, it was like, I'm immediately going to kiss your sister right next to you, which is like very young kids kind of exploring these type of things. I didn't view it as like, oh, you're my first girlfriend, now I'm going to go kiss your sister. Like he cheated on her.
But I think she views it that way.
She might have, but I'm thinking their first kiss, they could have been as young as 6 years old.
Yeah.
You really don't know, and we're not given enough info.
I didn't interpret them being 6.
I mean, that's the first time I kissed the neighbor girl. I was like 6. And my brother was probably younger when he did something like that. So, like, you know, that kind of thing does happen.
No, yeah, it's definitely possible.
Yeah. And, but I agree. Like, he's definitely the weak male character trying to play as a manly man.
Yeah.
And he's not very good at it. But there's also the idea, like, the role kind of falls in his lap because all the other candidates have died or leave.
Yeah.
So he's like the one, he's like, all right, I'll take over this role, this responsibility. And unfortunately, Jay kind of settles for him. That's the idea I was given. Like, after all her past bad relationships, she's like, all right, I'll settle for the nice guy.
I don't think she
Paul
settles
is
for
the
him.
nice guy.
I don't think she settles for him at all. I think she's always liked him, and that's why she didn't want to, like, have sex with him, because she didn't want it to be about sex. She didn't want it to be about the monster. She wanted, like, something else out of that relationship. And, like, he says at one point, I think right before they have sex, he's like, I liked you too, you know, which means that she liked him at some point, and, like, probably still does, we can predict. Yeah.
Nah, I get the feeling that she maybe liked him when they were little kids, but now it's when she talks about, like, her ideal guy and whatnot, it's more like a guy like Hugh. It's not a guy like Paul.
Well, and then
like,
she had a guy like Hugh, and she had a guy like Greg, and, you know, they didn't turn out so great. So I don't think it's really settling. I think it's growing up and learning what you need or what works for you, and, like, I think that's just it's just fucking growing up. Like, you go through these different relationships and you're like, I'm kind of done dating assholes, or I'm kind of done dating people that do this, and, like, I want someone that's more like Paul. And I wouldn't say that's settling. I think it's just, like, dating somebody different who works out better for you and doesn't end in a traumatic breakup.
Right. And I think all that's true, except she really doesn't look happy about it.
She really doesn't look happy about
Neither
it.
of them do. But I think that's just because,
neither of them do.
Like we were saying, it's the disillusionment of being in a relationship at all, or growing up at all. Like, even if you are in a happy relationship, death is still behind you. Death is still coming.
I don't think the relationship is happy. I think even, like, I mean, they're only dating for the last, like, 2 minutes of the movie, and, like, half of that is him driving by the prostitutes. Like, I don't think they're happy. And I don't think that they're going to be happy. I feel like, again, to tie it back to the assault metaphor, it's commenting on how she struggles to find a good relationship now, and I don't think Paul is either. He appears to be, but he's not.
Yeah, I agree.
He's very much fake.
That's why I view him as, like, she settles for him. Like, this. Yeah. After all these, whether it's sexual trauma or relationship trauma or whatever, all the trauma has led her to, all right, Paul's the guy I'll take. Because I think he's the one who will be the best for me, not necessarily the one I want.
Yeah, and I'm not even convinced that he'll be less abusive than Greg.
No, but I think that's the point.
Probably less abusive than Hugh, because Hugh was really abusive.
Yeah, but that's the point, is, like, you never know.
Yeah.
What did Greg do, other than...
disrespectful, we'll say, I guess.
Was he? She sleeps with Greg and then kind of, like, snubs him. She won't see Greg.
I think
so, like, Greg goes and cheats on her, right? But they're not together.
No, they're not
formally,
together.
And she never knows that.
But the fact that Greg does not believe her, so he thinks she is not in her right mind, and sleeps with her anyway. If he was correct that she wasn't in her right mind, then that's terrible to sleep with her. Because she's not doing this because she wants to sleep with him. She's doing this to get rid of a monster which he thinks isn't even real.
Yeah. So she kills Greg, more or less.
Oh, yeah. And that's also something that both of these movies do, in that in both of them, the women get to do that. I mean, she kind of kills Greg. It's implied that she sleeps with some sailors at one point in the movie, so she's killing them as well. And in Teeth, I mean, yeah, Brad fucking deserved it, but also, she rapes Brad. He's about to pull out. He's about to, like, oh, wait, actually, I'm not gonna go in there. And she literally grabs him and forces him into herself.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd use the word rape, but it's very, very strange. She does coerce Brad into...
Yeah.
He revokes consent. He revokes consent and she physically forces him into her.
I don't know. That's a strange gray area. But she does coerce her stepbrother into clipping him, and I feel like that was a pretty fucked up thing to do, because like now her stepdad has nobody because she left.
Are we meant
I
to
think that's not fair.
empathize with Brad? I mean, we have this whole scene where they give him a lot of screen time and he's like, why'd you have to do that? I loved her. Like, are we supposed to care?
I don't think so.
He's a weird. I feel like he's kind of not well written. He's like so exaggerated.
Yeah.
But then they try to add in these like subtle tones, and just like you can't have both.
Yeah.
It's like kind of one or the other. Like if you're gonna exaggerate a character to the utmost, don't try to humanize him at the same time, because you've already cut that off by having him play rah 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 music and have a dog that's in his room and be a dickhead to his girlfriend and his parents and everybody and try to fuck his stepsister.
I mean,
It's
part of
very
that
odd.
conversation is also, I think, almost helps to dehumanize him, because his dad comes in and says, listen, I know that you loved your mother. And then Brad's just like, no, I fucking hated that bitch. And of course, his female dog is named Mother. Like,
Right.
that's how he sees women. Like, he literally just treats women as dogs.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's the point of that line. Like, no, he's not like upset because his mother's gone or whatever. He just hates women.
Yeah, but he also, I mean, to further that point, he also tries to feed his girlfriend a doggy treat.
Yeah. Oh, I love that
Oh
scene.
my
He
God,
actually
that
does
was-
feed her. You love that scene?
Yeah.
That's just weird.
Oh,
I'm like,
no,
ugh.
it was such a good representation of like she's not pushing back for a while and he's like, "Hey," and she's like obviously not into it, and it's just like a good representation of like sex, I guess, sometimes. And like women just kind of have to be submissive sometimes to men and what they want, which is what the movie talks about a lot.
Mm.
Anyway.
Yeah,
So-
definitely.
What do you guys think about the final girls in each of these? So, I mean, to me, Jay doesn't really make good decisions at all in the movie. She gets more people killed. She doesn't really save anybody. And Dawn becomes a superhero.
Well, it follows is not about Jay running around and saving people. It's about Jay dealing with her trauma. Like, I think that phrasing it that way kind of misses what the movie is trying. Like, yeah, a lot of her decisions are not the smartest decisions, but they're not supposed to be. She's not a superhuman.
Right. And there is
Yeah,
no
I
saving
think
anybody. Like you can't stop it.
Yeah.
No, she actually gets people hurt. A lot of people hurt.
What else is she supposed to do?
No, I'm not
Exactly.
saying she's at fault.
No,
but,
yeah.
like she's not the heroine final girl in the movie at all, I don't think. Whereas Dawn is the opposite of that.
Yeah.
I mean, Jay is also literally named after Jamie Lee Curtis. But I don't think Dawn is a classic final girl either, because she's the final girl, but she's also the monster. She's the Medusa in the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why I call her like she becomes a superhero. I could see her like going off and getting a cape after the movie ends.
Yeah.
Love
That's it feels like a superhero origin story, you know. Now ready for my favorite part of the show, where we review each of the films in our bone review section. 1 through 4 bones with half bones in between. Starting us off this week is Devin Shepard.
All right. So teeth first. So like I said, loved this movie as a kid. Was really informative to me. I think Jess Wexler, or however you say her name, gives a great performance. I think it's funny. It's scary. I think it's a good balance. It's just a classic to me. So I'm going to give it 3 bones. And then It Follows is objectively a good movie. It's so beautiful. It's so well directed. The performances are great. I love the script. Like, it's super, super tight script. Everything's great about it. I just have watched this movie so many times that it's starting to wear on me a little bit, to be honest. But I think I'm going to have to give it 3 bones. David, what were your bone reviews?
So Teeth first. I really like Teeth a lot. I think that before I saw this movie, a friend on set going to watch Teeth at night, she's like, "Oh, I hate that movie. It teaches women to be afraid of men." She apparently has not actually seen Teeth. But some men that she had spoken to walked away from it with a fear of women. And I think, honestly, after seeing this, if you're a man who walks away from this with a fear of women, then I don't trust that man. Yeah, I'm giving this movie 3 bones. It was so much fun. I was just laughing the entire time. It's a really good movie. It follows. I go back and forth with it follows. I as much as Quentin Tarantino is kind of an arrogant douche, I think that his review of this movie was perfect. He said it's so good that I'm angry that it wasn't great. It has so much interesting stuff in it, and it just doesn't really come together. I feel like we're talking a lot about the ending, but I feel like it's just kind of anticlimactic, which I guess is the point because life is anticlimactic, but it does make it a less interesting movie. And that pool climax scene just feels so weak. It's really interesting, but I'm still gonna give it 3 bones today. Tomorrow I might give it less, but today I'll give it 3 bones.
Okay, so the Cadaver Dogs for once are almost entirely in agreement. I'm going to start with Teeth. I like Teeth. It gives it this weird B-movie quality. Some of the scenes are laugh out loud funny, but I wish there were more of them. And the shock valve didn't affect me as much as I thought it would. Maybe because I'm 30. But maybe when I was a teenager, I would have been like, oh my God, because I didn't want to watch the movie. And I'm like, I'm not that interested in watching people get clipped. But now watching it, it's pretty funny. I didn't find the movie super deep, but now talking about it, there are a lot more layers than I initially thought. So I'm going to give it 2.5 bones. I think it's a good movie. And I think people should watch it if they know what it's about. And it's probably funnier than you think it is. As for It Follows, I agree. I think I'm pissed off it's not great. But I do think it's scary. I think the image of a person naked coming at you that you don't expect is creepy. That scene when she finds the girl in her basement or in her kitchen pissing herself is frightening to me. And the thing coming at you. But then it hits this weird lull, really, at the end of the second act and the beginning of the third act, which is kind of like distilled. And maybe thematically, that's like the coming down point in your life when you realize that your fantasies are dead and you're becoming an adult or something. But it just kind of made the movie a little boring in those later sections. Although the pool scene, I think, was okay because it was playing on this trope of a bunch of the high school or young people getting together and fighting the big bad. Then they come up with some big plan that works. Except this time their plan was terrible and it didn't work at all, which I thought was kind of cool. And it has great music and it looks really cool. So It Follows gets 3 bones. I think it's really good. I just wish it was a little bit better. All right, guys. Well, that's it for this week. So I hope your horror hounds have had something to sink your teeth into. And maybe it's safe to uncross your legs, but I'm not sure just yet. Until next time.
Vagina Dentata! Vagina Dentata! Vagina.